Welcome back, everyone. And boy, do we have a show for you today. So I have brought back on a guest that I had on about 3 weeks ago or a month or so ago. His name is Steve Noack. And Steve is a quantum healer, spiritual counselor, as well as a near-death experiencer. And following our episode of quantum healing and the nervous system, I was watching a podcast where Steve was sharing his near-death experience, and he was going into great detail about the walk-in concept or the soul exchange concept. And I thought this is just fascinating. So probably 5 weeks ago, I had Ryan Gardner on, who had experienced a near-death experience as well, but he was unfamiliar with this walk-in concept. So I immediately reached out to Steve and asked him, hey, would you come back on my show? Because I want to hear about your near-death experience, and I want to talk more about this soul exchange walk-in concept. So welcome, Steve. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I thought what we could do is let's dive a little bit into how were you before? What were you like before your near-death experience?
Very different person. I was, very negative, stuck in my patterns of addiction, stuck in my patterns of self-abuse, self-hate, a lot of childhood trauma, a lot of car accidents that led me to have a lot of pain in my body. Many car accidents. So I was a very negative, looking at the world, all dark aspects type of person.
So you were in a lot of emotional, mental, and physical pain, it sounds like.
Yeah, everything. I didn't even want to be here. Suicidal, you name it.
Wow. And then, so what led up to your near-death experience? What happened?
Well, to start at the beginning, I was riding my big wheel, which is basically a plastic tricycle. And I had come down the driveway, getting ready to leave, go somewhere with my parents, between two cars, and I had been hit by a drunk driver. I went entirely underneath the car, and she dragged me to the end of the road before she had realized I was underneath. People basically jumped out in the road and stopped her. When I was hit, I woke up basically leaning on someone, a little kid, and I'm leaning on someone. And my head is down at this time when I open my eyes, and I'm leaning to my side. And the first thing I see as I open my eyes is the bottom of someone's hair. And the hair is white, but almost luminescent white, silvery. And then the same color bottom of their robe, but it was a little more gray. And I didn't know who it was. I figured it was just a person. So when I turned to look at them, I saw no face. I saw a hood. And this being had no face. They only had light in its place. And I remember thinking at the time, the light pulled me in, and it was so bright, but I wasn't squinting. And we spoke without speaking. And they told me so many things, but I didn't remember. They told me they were going to block my memory. I was so young, but they would be back. And I would understand why later. But what I did catch a quick glimpse of that I could remember was basically a divine blueprint underneath all of creation. And this was everything was built upon this field, which I later figured out was the quantum field.
Wow. How old were you when this happened?
I was 4.
Wow. That's so young. And so were you sent to the hospital, or, what happened? Where did you seem to have this take place? Was it right immediately when you were hit by the car, or do you remember?
Yeah, pretty much immediately, because I remember a fade happening, and I could almost, I was out of my body, and I saw my eyes go in the back of my head, and then everything faded. And then I woke up, which what I thought was waking up, but didn't make sense, because I was in a room where nobody was, and the room was carpeted. It looked a lot like a romper room, if you'd ever seen romper room, but very kid friendly, kind of, no toys or anything. But
wow. So Okay, so were you sent to the hospital by ambulance or,
Yeah, ambulance to the hospital. I broke my shoulder blade, my clavicle, collapsed lungs, broken ribs. The whole side of my face had been dragged on the pavement, and there was a few other things that's hard to remember because it was, so many years ago. My mom doesn't even really remember it all, but I have the newspaper clippings, which is interesting.
Oh, wow. So when this light being presented itself to you, how long do you think that lasted? How, between the time that you were hit by the car and then you were sent to the hospital, when did you wake up?
To
Like
me,
how
it felt
long?
like it was like a day or two. I believe it took me to wake up. To me, it felt like minutes.
I've heard that. Yeah. And I feel that that's an experience that many near-death experiencers have. It's this weird sense of time.
Yeah, it was like so much. I realized later, and of course we'll get to that, but there was so much covered in that short amount of time, or at least what I perceived to be time.
Yeah. So when this light being presented itself to you and it shared to you the divine blueprint in the quantum field, what information did you take from that? How did you process all of that at age 4?
Well, I couldn't process it at age 4, so they told me they were going to block out a lot of it, and it would come back later for me to remember. So yeah, other than seeing the divine blueprint and seeing this world that seemed to be perfect and pristine, where anger and all these other feelings were not sustainable and did not exist, it was everything was breathing energy. Wow. And it was beautiful. So that's the point where I wanted to walk out. I wanted to go there.
I bet. And so when you finally came to and woke up in the hospital, did you remember, how much of this did you remember at that time? Or did it take time for you to start to remember seeing this being?
Took many years to remember exactly what had happened. But when I thought about it, I could feel inside me that something had happened. I just couldn't remember what. It's like just that stir inside you where you're like, yeah, I know something different happened. And that was for many years, up until I was probably about 33, 35.
Wow. So did your parents recognize anything at the time, when you were 4? Did they recognize any of these things, things that you had happened on the other side?
What my mother used to say was, I don't know how you have this connection with animals. My uncle had like an attack dog and nobody was supposed to get near it. And one day I had let him out and I started playing with him and everything. And there were just small little markers throughout my life that kind of showed that compassion and that love as one. So there were little notions. My mother said I also didn't cry a lot. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but.
Interesting. So after your near death, after that incident happened, what happened in your life? What was the next steps?
Well, I went through a pretty regular traumatic teen years. Got into alcohol, drugs, you name it. I didn't hurt anybody, mind you, but mostly myself. It was self-hate, even to the point where I would cut myself, things like that. And in my mind at that time, it made me feel alive. That's how numb I was.
Oh, wow. Interesting. And I've heard that.
So
yeah.
Got to the point where, I thought about suicide a lot. And, fast forward to me being a store manager at GameStop. And I don't know if you want to go me to kind of tell you when I first realized something was happening.
Yeah.
Okay. So I had flipped the car over 75 miles an hour 5 times. I had 5 occupants with me. When the car stopped, there were only 2 left in the car.
Wow.
So they had flown out during the car rolling. Everybody landed on the lawn, got up and walked away. There was blood and everything, but everybody was okay. So I had broken my elbow during this time and I was set to have surgery. And when I got to the hospital, I was feeling very anxious. I wanted to leave. And right before I got up to leave, I heard this voice in my head tell me the same thing they told me when I was a kid. And I don't think I mentioned that. But when I turned to this being, I asked them what happened. So what happened, but I didn't have to move my mouth or anything. And they said, Stephen, put your head down. Everything's going to be all right. So I did. And that was the same exact voice, the same exact thing they said. And it was like something snapped in my mind. And this energy came over me that was all peace and love. Went through with the surgery, went back to work. This elderly woman had a fall right outside on the cement. And I went out there. I was store manager, only one working there. And instinctively, I don't know why, but I put my hand on her back, and she looked at me, and she was in pain. She looked at me and she said, I'm all warm and I don't feel any pain. So I didn't think about it until I went back into work, and I was like, that was really weird. And then I started to hear people's thoughts, and I began to gauge this by asking them whether they wanted a bag or not with the things they were buying. I would ask it in my mind. I would hear the response, and then I would ask them out loud. So I started to figure that out, and then I could feel people's hunger. They would walk in after I'd eaten lunch. I'd get gut-wrenchingly starving. So this happened quite a few times until I asked a few people, and then quite a few turned around and just walked straight back out.
Wow.
So then I would have spontaneous bursts of laughter, spontaneous tears, spontaneous emotions that I couldn't control. And it was all this interference in the field. And I knew I had woken up and just got here, if that makes sense.
So you think this particular time was when you had what's called a walk-in soul or a soul exchange?
Right. And that's just when all the memories came back of everything that they told me they were going to block out until I was older. And then I figured out why. You know, it took me about 10 to 15 years to integrate. During that time, I had lost all satisfaction in everything that I used to do. And I had to start forming different sustenance. I had to start engaging different energies in order to integrate and have this higher being manifest within me. And I was sort of being driven and didn't realize it. So I went to try to find God in every single church that I could. I just went to all these churches and wanted to go talk to people, and God wasn't there. You know, I figured that out. So I left there quite a few times in tears. The doors were locked. I knew also that I had awoken to a war. I was in some sort of war, and then I was down here. And it was like, okay, we're at war. You know, that's when all the synchronicities with angels started happening, things like that. And it got to the point where I couldn't avoid it. I was either crazy, going to the 7th floor, or it was real. Because I was the biggest skeptic of a lot of people. My family wanted me to see a shrink. They knew something wasn't right, but, you know, I don't blame them, you know.
Yeah. And didn't you had mentioned to me that your daughter was saying, where did my daddy go?
Yeah, my ex used to tell me, you know, she wants her old father back. And I just didn't have the same satisfactory inputs as that old person, you know, and it was a better person that was coming out.
Interesting. So the concept of a walk-in or a soul exchange is basically when a soul takes residence in the body and then another soul leaves and then another one comes in to vacate or to come in and to live in the body.
Yeah, it's almost like being a transcendental medium, and then you step out and they step in, except from what they told me was, here, I'll start kind of from the beginning. They talked about ascension. They talked about the quantum field. They talked about the role that I would play in the evolution of humanity and the consciousness expansion of humanity, but they had to clear all the lower energy. And that's why they were coming down, is to clear all that density in the lower energy so humanity could expand. So yeah, there were a lot of talk about connecting others to the quantum field and their divine blueprint and the place that they had brought me or I had gone. You know, I realized we had a file there that we could retrieve at any time. And then I started studying the Bible. I realized it was the promise of Christ and that inheritance. And I started to put the pieces together with just finding God in every religion I could, and the truth.
Yeah, so it's like it kind of set you on this path of seeking the truth. And I think many people, from what I've been diving into this walk-in soul exchange concept quite a bit recently, and when I'm researching this, it can happen to a lot of different people. And I think a lot of people, this is happening through this ascension process. And whether it's as jarring as it was with you with a near-death experience, or, with me, I feel like I was just sharing with you before we started recording that I feel I've had these couple of situations where this may have happened to me on my birthday, on certain days where I go to sleep on that day of my birthday and then I wake up almost like a new person. It reminds me of that Nicolas Cage movie, The Family Man, or, whatever. It's almost just a very weird, almost like a weird Hallmark movie or whatever. But, you go to sleep as one person and then you wake up completely different. And I've recognized this. I could definitely define 2 times in my life, but I've never had a near-death experience. So, it makes you question, can this happen, from a soul level? We've signed up for this, Yeah,
I mean, to tell you the truth, I didn't believe in any of it until I started to see all these synchronicities and healing people. And I understand that I couldn't do that as a human being. I couldn't touch somebody and have them feel my handprint from 3,000 miles away as a human being. You can't do it. So the light entered my container and it seemed to have its own intelligence and guide me to where I needed to be. So after a while and enough synchronicities, I understood that it was an angel, and that there was just no other explanation for the things that I was seeing and what was happening.
Yeah. And it's like this higher state of consciousness came into your avatar, your body, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. And they told me, hey, we're inside all people. Heaven is within. It's just that they're not resonating to reach that space in consciousness to allow us to work in their life.
Interesting. And so did you recognize having any dreams or anything during this time when you noticed a shift in, your personality and the way that you were conducting yourself?
I mean, I wouldn't say dreams at that time, but there was quite a few instances, and I remember this clear as day, where I went to a gas station, and I'm standing in line waiting for this guy to ring me out, and I see this kid step out of line, and he grabs a Reese's peanut butter cup, and he gets back in line. No big deal, except he does it again, and he does it the same exact way. Turns to his dad, asks him the same exact thing, and he only had 1 peanut butter cup. So I said, what the hell just happened? I walked out to my car, turned on my car, and on the radio, they're talking to a woman. She just won a radio contest. She's happy. And then click, a phone's ringing on the radio, and they answer it. It's her, and they're asking her the question. And I said, I just heard this. I know the answer. So that's when I was like, do I have to go to the hospital? What the hell's happening?
Interesting.
And I just understood that I was feeling things faster than everybody else. I was interpreting reality faster.
That's funny. And it's like, that's happened to me several times. And I'm like, is that a glitch in the matrix, or am I just vibrating at a higher frequency where I pick up on those things too? It's like, I'll see a man walk by with a dog, and then maybe 30 seconds later, I see the same man walk by in the same position with the dog again. And I'm like, wait, it's like, you got to kind of check yourself and say, did I just see that happen?
Yeah, I was vibrating so high, I would turn bright red. And my assistant manager at the time at GameStop turned to me and he goes, dude, you're as red as a lobster. And I wasn't sick or anything at the time, didn't get sick. It would come and it would go. And it was like my molecules were being vibrated so fast. It was so harsh. I would come home, and one day it started happening. I put an ice cube on my head, and the ice cube just literally exploded.
Wow.
I mean, 4 feet away. And I was like, okay. So I started keeping notebooks of all the synchronicities, sitting on a bench at work, and this little pamphlet flies by me in the wind, stops in front of me, and it's an Archangel Michael statue. Just stuff like that, and it never stopped. And I would hear conversations, or I would hear the radio, and they would sort of block out part of what was being said for me to pick out certain words and put them together and make my own sentence. So it was like my ear would depress and then come back and depress and come back. And out of that, I would get a message. You know, I could overhear conversations and then they would sort of message me that way.
That's really interesting. It's almost like you wonder in these near-death experiences if the pineal gland is just wide open, you know, it's like, whew,
Right.
You know, because you hear people, when I worked in the hospital, there were people who would get struck by lightning, you know, living in Florida, they'd be out golfing or whatever, struck by lightning. And then they would start to have these really weird phenomena happening, you know, to them after this incident, if they would live through it, you know. So just hearing their stories and you just question, you know, what maybe neurotransmitters were turned on or, you know, something. What do you think happens in those situations?
I believe we only use what, how much percent of our brain?
Like a small, less than 5%,
Yeah.
right?
So I believe those neural pathways were opened and connected to the quantum field. And it scrambled me for a long time until I started choosing the energy that I was supposed to sustain and build this higher intelligence, higher self, whatever you want to call it, angelic self. Until I engaged enough in my own healing, I was a mess. You know, it was like a war between the positive and the negative.
Yeah. So so after you experienced
during that time, I also figured out the war in heaven happens within you.
Yeah.
I started to put together the different pieces with the 7 archangels, the 7 chakras, 7 demonic princes, and us being given our creative power.
Yeah. So, you know, after you had this walk-in experience, how long did it take you to start actually tapping into these abilities and gifts in a positive way? You know, it sounds like you went through quite a healing process through that time too.
Yeah, I had to really get on board with becoming accountable for what I created as far as pain for other people in this world. And I wanted it all back, but it took me about 10 years until I had my first client. And I could say, okay, I'm going to try this. And then, you know, you slowly go through that. And then you go through the ego phase where you think that is you, but it wasn't, you know. So it was about 10 years before I took my first client, probably about 15 before I got a real good handle on the professional, humble, let me move out of the way and let God do his work.
And I think we're conduits, right? We're vessels for that energy. And I think, you know, you and I both, understanding Reiki, right? It's that energy moving through us. And we've got to just kind of step aside and from a conscious standpoint and allow that energy to move through and go where it needs to go, whether that's through, you know, through us or to the people we're healing or whatever it may be. But yeah. And the more we block it and create resistance, the more it creates issues in our own physical body. At least that's been my experience.
For sure. And my only job at that point was to become responsible for my shadows, for any lower creations I made, and give them to God. Basically clear my subconscious so that I could expand bandwidth, a lot like internet, and carry more data through me as an energetic being, you know?
Yeah. And I
knew I had to give this to people, put it that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I do feel that the more we clean our physical vessel, the easier it is for that energy to flow through too. So letting go of those denser emotions and, you know, making sure that physically we're, you know, healthy and doing the best that we can. And because I know for me, the days that it's like, oh, I'm not taking care of myself, then the energy gets stuck. And then I'm like, all right, I've got to work on some things here. I've got to move some of these emotions out.
If I'm not cleansing every day, with all the things passing through my processor, if I'm not cleansing every day, then it's going to storage. And you don't want it in the storage because it's going to be clogged. And that's where the childhood trauma is, all that stuff. So I know if I have a physical pain more so than usual, it's time to cleanse because I have density gathering in that area. It took me a while to figure out that after all the car accidents, I mean, other than getting completely run over, flipping a car over 5 times at 70 miles an hour, I was T-boned, I was rear-ended, and now I take nothing for pain. I rely solely on my energetic system to guide me to where I need to be, because pain is a teacher. Without it, I wouldn't have been humbled. I wouldn't have learned everything I did. It actually taught me how to love people, because I don't want them to ever feel what I felt.
Yeah. And it's like we can empathize deeper because we felt and experienced that pain. And I know I feel that too. It's like there's been times in my life where I had such tremendous pain. I mean, I couldn't even walk. I felt paralyzed. I had some severe back pain. And so now it's like I empathize with people on that level, because when you're in a state of pain and you're so badly in it, you just want it to end. And there were times when I thought I just want to end my life because it hurts so badly. And so, I don't, it's like setting aside that point of judgment on people. Like, why do people commit suicide? It's like, you don't really know how deeply their pain is until you're in those shoes, and then you can experience it for yourself. And I was there at one point, and it was tough. And it was like, I remember saying to my parents, now I know why people commit suicide, because the pain it's terrible. And they were terrified when I said that comment, but it was a reality for me. But I also can now take a step back and look at those people and just really empathize with them, where they're at in their life.
Right. Well, one other thing that happened that was pretty harsh was I woke up to all these shadows standing around me, walking around me. They would phase in and they would phase out. Some would be darker than others. Some would be lighter. They were telling me I was going to hell. I was a piece of crap. You're never going to make anything good out of your life. And they were beating me down for about a month. I didn't sleep for like 2 weeks until I realized they were me. And what I was shown at that time, once I figured out I'm the one in control here, this is my consciousness, then I was brought back again to my NDE, and I was shown myself as a beam of love, and then a screen all the way around me with all my memories imprinted on this screen, and they were data. So now all around me is this data that I sent out and got back from the world in order to interact with it and understand it.
It's like a video game.
That's what I was cleaning. Yeah, it was a lot like a video game. So I had to go to this screen and I had to claim that and give it to God and basically do my life review now.
That's fascinating. That's very interesting. And so when I worked in the hospital, I was visualizing things as well. I was seeing shadow beings. I was also seeing mists leaving people's bodies at the time of death. I was seeing mists enter people's bodies when they were being coded or resuscitated. And so at that time, it scared me. So I shut it off. I remember going home and just writing down on a piece of paper, I don't want to see this anymore. It's overwhelming. I don't understand what's going on. And, now I have a different understanding of it, because I do understand that oftentimes when we're seeing those shadows, it could be ours that we have to deal with, or it could be earthbound spirits. I've had a lot of that activity, too.
Right.
But I think.
Yeah, they eventually started coming too and telling me they were sent here by God. I'm like, you're full of crap, dude. But after enough times and then figuring out that I could open a portal within my center, transmute them and send them to where they go, I was like, okay, they're probably telling the truth after quite a few of them have said it, which soon became the Christ to me. And I also didn't tell you, during that time when I had the walk-in come in, I was led through 2 twin flame experiences in a very short amount of time, full-on psychic merge, feeling what they felt, hearing them in your head. And it was to deeply heal myself on a divine level, both people, so that I could unite my own divine feminine and my own divine masculine and become singular. Not so that I can depend on anyone else for approval, but I became a generator of love. I no longer needed anyone else to give it back to me. So that enabled me to give people love.
That's awesome. And I think people they get confused with that twin flame concept, that it's something outside of us, when really it's something that we are integrating within our own divine masculine and divine feminine aspects or energies, right?
Right. Absolutely. It's the veil being torn, and these two energies within us coming together.
Yeah, it's what the Shiva and the Shakti, I think, is what they call it. Like there's those two energies that come together. I think that's what they're called. But I think too, we're learning to integrate that and learning how to balance those energies within our, own vessels, and having a deeper understanding of, recognizing when they're out of balance or out of harmony. I know for me, I can kind of pick up on it if I'm feeling a little more competitive or aggressive. I'm like, ooh, something's going on here. I got to heal this masculine aspect of myself, or feeling a little more insecure.
Once you're able to sort of clear what's between you and your divine self, then it should be in right away. It should be instantaneous. I figured out that I could process all lower frequencies almost instantaneously, instead of store them for later. And it's like the higher self is just this intuitive processor,
Yeah. And it's like that oversoul that can see, like looking down at everything from a higher, like an eagle, looking down at everything from a higher perspective. And so now it's like, we're just learning how to do that as well, where we can look down and say, okay, I'm observing these energies or these reactions within myself. How do I move through them? How do I clear them? How do I process them? And I think, I'm similar to you. I've learned how to do it a lot quicker than, say 10 years ago. It's like, it would take a long time.
I realized I became the observer. So now that I'm watching this character, if I'm going to go home back to heaven or whatever and watch a movie, am I going to like this character? Has this character gone through all the human emotions and had redemption, made me cry, made me laugh, all this stuff? Did he have his full experience, and that I didn't do anything wrong, and I could claim this part of myself that was promised to me in the field?
I love that. I love that. Observing yourself as if your life is a movie. And, you have a choice. You could have a horror movie, or you could have a nice, pleasant, happy movie.
Right. And it's going to be condensed down to like a 2-hour movie, and they're going to be like asking you about parts of it. And man, when I watch it, I just want to know that I experienced as much as I could. And I returned as the resonance of love. The way I came into my body as a baby, because we come here as love, I want to leave as love.
Yeah. And I think that's really what we're getting back to, right? It's like, we're here experiencing this journey, but the underlying lesson is to always continue to follow love, right? To always continue to harmonize, align back with love. And it seems so easy, but then it's not always easy.
No, I mean, after everything, I got to a point where I realized I was inside sort of a sandbox video game, if you will, playing my own character, in which I also saw other light beings and myself standing at a console that sort of had one flat part in the middle and then 2 rounded parts on the side that were also flat. But we were there programming and playing, and I was like, I'm a character playing myself. And it became a lot easier to understand. If I manufacture this type of energy, I live in this type of world. If I manufacture that type of energy, I live in that world. And it really became, that's when I started to get into the central nervous system, clearing and resetting neurological, rewiring into the quantum field. I started to learn I could rewire other people, show them how to do that, and sort of free them from this matrix, which was the prison of their own nervous system.
Exactly. And I think once you wake up to that concept of, I've been living on autopilot, for most of my life, and then you're like, gosh, I have free will. I have choices. I can choose at any timeline that I want to live on, based off of where I am, emotionally, where my nervous system is. I think, many people are on overdrive in their nervous system, and that overdriven nervous system is causing them to make choices that they may not have made if their nervous system was balanced and relaxed and intact, right?
For sure. Yeah. Most important is claiming the sovereignty and understanding that we do have that power. And, once I say this is a sacred space, nothing that's not love is going to resonate in me, then it has to move. And you're also going to be made aware of when it enters you. And that's the other thing. I learned, okay, our waking consciousness is our operating system. Our hard drive is our subconscious. So I needed to correct my inputs and outputs also. Well, what I was allowing in as far as energy, you'll approach me with love and respect, or you're not going to get any function here. But also outputs, what I was creating and then placing on the outside, was it constructive for humanity? So it became inputs and outputs, correcting that.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that. I love that analogy with the computer system, because it's so easy to understand, that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's exactly what we are. We're a quantum computer system.
Yeah, and everybody knows what happens when your hard drive gets full and you start getting mad at your computer because it won't pull up the things you want it to do and do the things you want it to do. And we're similar. We can really narrow down our nervous system to a tunnel.
Yeah, we got to clean our cache and our history and all that stuff, just
Yeah.
getting rid of all that old baggage from this life, past lives, parallel lives, whatever we've got going on. It's just clearing out all of that
do your
stuff.
Maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Maintenance on your multidimensional self. One of the things I do is whenever I do cleansing, I call all my multidimensional selves into the now, and I claim the knowledge they have in the now. I'm like, you're mine. It's time to other things, but we're so spread out in different waves, forms, and frequencies that to become a singular aspect of love and God, because that's what God is, we should be claiming those things as our birthright. You're mine. I want that power. Mm-hmm. You're going to give it to me.
Yeah. And I, and I deserve that, right? It's like, I deserve all aspects of myself, all fragments of myself to
Mm-hmm.
come back in to my body, and
that's soul retrieval. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And you and I both do that. It's like we help ourselves do that, and we help our clients do that. It's like bringing our power back, because many of us have handed that away, our whole lives. I know I did.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I was always searching to be loved, even in my relationships. I didn't realize it until I started to do my healing, but I was looking for my absent mother. And I was like, that was not fair to so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. So that helped me see a lot of things. And I was like, wow, no woman deserves what my mom did to me.
Yeah.
And once I got there, I started not placing anything outside myself that was lower, but taking it into me to crack myself open and understand myself deeper. It was like, no more giving drama here, drama here, drama here. You put it within you for you and God to figure out.
Yeah. And that's it. It's instead of pointing the finger at others, in the relationships, it's time to turn around and point that finger back at ourselves and say, what is it that we need to heal? Why are we attracting these types of scenarios, partners, situations in our life over and over and over again? It's because there's something within us that needs to be healed that we aren't learning that needs to be healed.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, great, you did my laundry, you did my lunch, but we have no communication and no intimate connection. And I was also walled off too, so having me understand a lot of stuff came from my mom, and that it wasn't her fault, it came from her parents,
mm-hmm.
Really helped me forgive myself and the experiences I had.
Yeah. And I think that's helpful, looking at our parents as children as well, and seeing them from a different perspective. I know that was helpful for me in understanding, why do my parents act the way that they do? And then just really sitting with it and visualizing them as children being treated the way that they were treated. And of course, that's why they were acting the way that they were. And then that was handed down, where it's like, I think you and I stepped into this life to heal these generational patterns, which many people are doing. you know, here in their ascension path. It's time for those patterns to, you know, to be healed, and for us to set these new higher vibrational.
Like, they're expanding on a planetary level, like you say. The sun is helping us, and then once they expand, then it's time to process. That's when you want to process and let all that stuff go after your expansion.
Absolutely. And I think the integration period is just as important as that expansion, you know, period. I think we get really excited in the, I'm raising my frequency. And then, you know, a few days later, you're like, oh man, I raised my frequency.
Yeah.
No, I'm integrating
now I have to
it.
sift through all this density and then transmute it. Then if I don't have the tools, I'm figuring it out on my own, and it's rough. But, you know, one of the tools I use is I ask my inner child to become present. I ask my inner child to show me what love feels like. I ask him to show me what joy feels like. I ask him to show me what excitement feels like, purity. And I go through the list of feelings, which now become kind of like an emotional bat belt. Okay, I have all these tools in my belt, and I can fire these into my nervous system whenever I want. And this rewires your pathways over time to really understand that you're already loved.
Absolutely. And it's just, you know, I think a lot of it is bringing it from the subconscious into our conscious and recognizing that that's what we are. We're divine and we're love.
Yeah. Like, this is the energy I'm made out of. I came into this density to experience this world made of density, but I'm not this body. I'm the being inside this body.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is great. So Steve, is there anything else that you want to share revolving your near-death experience, or anything that we haven't shared?
Let's see. Can I pull my notebook out real quick?
Yeah, of course. I know it's hard to remember everything.
It really is. You know, it's like to go through it, because it was such a long journey.
I think too, as we merge timelines, it's harder to remember.
Right. Yeah. Oh, dude, I was forgetting so many things. During this integration, I would walk up to a door handle and forget which way it turned. Yeah. I would, like, there were just very strange things to where it showed me there was another innocence inside me that had not experienced this world yet.
That's interesting.
I'm like, you know how to do this. You've done it 100 times. And then, oh, okay, that's how you do it. But I had this joy in me, and I still do, and this excitement and this just fever to experience this world and things that felt like I was experiencing for the first time. You know, even though I had done them, I had never experienced that range of richness in this world, and how beautiful it was, how sacred this place is, things like that. But overall, it was a learning my way back to love, learning how to resonate as that without using another person. You know, I started to see creation as a whole behind all these people, and I was able to love creation, but I didn't have to like the person. You know, I don't have to like you, but I love you as part of creation. So I'll give you love, but I won't let you bring that junk into me. You know, I'm still able to give you love. So it was reestablishing my connection with creation and what separates us from it, because we're all vibrating at separate frequencies. And I understood the more I raised the mind, which was strictly clearing myself. It's not, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do that. It was inviting light into my container, telling my density, my lower self, this is not your space anymore, I'm expanding. And being responsible for everything I created within myself, any feeling. I mean, down to the thoughts where you have your internal dialogue, no longer tolerating that and correcting that as well.
Yeah. And so it's almost like in your life, you really experienced that duality or that contrast very significantly from, you know, earlier on when you were in all those car accidents and you're miserable and negative, and then you had this, you know, walk-in happen, and then now you're in a state of understanding that we're pure love and experiencing life from a more joyful, adventurous, playful type of energy. You know, I was able
to witness myself as a needle. And whenever I created lower, it would lean me that way. Whenever I created higher, it would lean me that way. and they would be totally different experiences. And I started to understand the value of every single feeling I created, every word I said. And I'm not perfect, but now I have this higher processing that steps in immediately and says, you don't want to create that.
Yeah.
You don't want to connect with that person and have this conversation because it's going to go here, amongst the other healing things. But
Yeah. It's so funny how now I'm the same way. It's like, I have a choice. I can engage in that or I cannot engage because, you know, where our energy flows is where, you know, our attention goes, or, you know, where our energy flows. So it's like, I
right.
can choose to engage in that, whether that be in person, social media, whatever it may be. But then oftentimes it's like, no, that's not my reality. That's not the energy that I even want to entertain. And so I think that's part of that ascension journey, that awakening process, to understanding, you know, that we do choose, you know, our external reality based off of our internal, you know, feelings and emotions and choices.
When I woke up, I started gardening for no reason. You know, when they returned, I'm like, what the hell is going on? I'm in the garden gardening. And I realized the soil that I was turning was also representative of what was turning inside me.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's a really good gauge. If you look in my garden, you can figure out my state of being. So I started to connect the inner with the outer with every single thing I did. I can use inanimate objects to gauge how I'm feeling just by looking at whether my car's a mess.
That's cool.
By looking at this or that. So the type of things that needed to be cleared. There's something else I was going to say too, but I forgot. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I do the same, Steve. It's like I can tell almost what dimension I'm in based off of looking at the sky. It's like,
Yeah.
I see chemtrails. Okay, I know what dimension I'm in, or it's a beautiful blue sky. Okay, I'm in a higher frequency. You know, it's just really funny. And Greg Braden talks about this on his show, Missing Links. And he talks about how we can, based off of, like you talked about, if your car is running, you know, poorly, to relate it to your body, to relate it to your internal, you know, what's going on in your internal that's creating this external reality, you know, for you. So it's hard for people to understand that concept, but once you grasp it, it's so simple. It's like, I get it now, you know, like this light bulb goes off and you're like, okay, you know, I'm having a flat tire because I'm tired. I'm overextending myself. I'm out of air. I'm out of breath.
That's funny. I had a flat tire like last month. I'm like, well, I haven't had one in like 20 years. I think I'm due. And I was like, yeah, it just means to go home.
It does. And just relax.
One thing I forgot to tell you, and I don't know if I said, but the change was so rapid. Like none of my friends from high school wanted to hang out with me. They were scared of me. People really got scared of me. They got scared. And it was because it was such a rapid change to a different person.
I'm wondering too, you brought in a higher frequency, you know, being or aspect. So you were probably sifting their density as well, just by being in their presence.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I would just blurt things out that people were thinking or feeling. And I don't think they like that.
Yeah.
But now it's gotten to the point to where I can feel when somebody has density. I can feel when somebody's thinking something bad by how it feels. The wave hitting me by their quantum emission, and I could feel if that matches words or not. I could feel what's true and what's not. And I think that's going to be highly useful for people starting to learn their own intuitive module, which is their heart, and then their neural interface being their brain. And that's how we process reality in loops back and forth through our system. So as people learn to sharpen that more and discern reality, they're going to need that in the future, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Because it's when we move more into that telepathic way of speaking, we're going to have to be able to, like, we need some training wheels before we start doing that. Because I think as a society, many of us who are doing the inner work, we're already beginning to do that. I mean, I know it sounds like you are, and I totally am, you know, with certain people who are on my frequency. But to start feeling and hearing the thoughts of, you know, everyone in the collective can be a little bit overwhelming. I know I've had to tell my higher self to turn the volume down a little bit because I'm like, I'm hearing angelic music all the time. I'm hearing conversations in other rooms or other areas that I'm not even near, so I think our spidey senses are kicking up. They're getting stronger, and
For sure.
we have to
It
learn
was
how
so
to use them.
There's been quite a few times where I had to tell them to lower it, and I tell clients that too. Don't be afraid to tell them to turn it down a little bit, but now I know when it's time to cleanse. They show up, I begin transmuting or yawning, and then that's my cleansing period, to the point where there's tears running down my face and there's salt afterwards. So it's like, now I've given myself over so much to do that work. They come in, I know they're there, they go. And I can do it so smoothly sometimes. It'll be them talking to people and they won't understand it's them and not me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do that too. And it's like, I think you just start to integrate more with it, where it becomes, it's you, it's a being, it's becoming you, and so I think it is, though. It's like, we're like little kids just learning how to navigate our bodies in this higher frequency.
Technically, I'm really 15 right now, but so yeah, I mean, it's like, I learned that nothing was serious except for people suffering and helping them feel better. I'm like, energy. Okay, that's what I'm serious about. Everything else I can find humor in. And I never could before. I got to the point where I stopped laughing. I stopped everything. I was numb. And once that started and the integration was complete somewhat, I began to feel joy and laughter. And then I could hear them in me. They would be over here, or I could feel the side of my brain would get pressure, and then they would start, and they're like a peanut gallery. It never stopped. Yeah. I mean, I can stop it now, but it's like humor, and that was really important to get me through.
I agree, because it's like, you can either have that negative self-talk or that humorous, self-talk. I agree with that. And I think humor raises our frequency, the more we laugh and we have that childlike state. I agree with that. I joke, a lot of my, higher guidance, they're hilarious, and I'm like, well, I've kind of got a humor here in this third dimension too, but I can see where my oversoul comes in with that, and it's just funny. But I think we're just learning. We're learning how to use our intuitive gifts. And, I know many of us, we tapped into this really young, but I know many of us shut it off, out of fear, or, we were being ridiculed by other kids, or, whatever it may be.
And quantum is science now. It's no longer that people can deny it. What they will deny is that we have this blueprint available in the quantum field, and it's ours to claim, and it's made out of pure love, and we can reconnect the pathways of our nervous system there. And that part is relatively new, all the neural processing and the computerization of it all. But I believe God is a computational entity or being, and we can give it whatever we want to create what we want. But we're told to love. We're supposed to care about each other. And human beings, for some reason, still struggle to get that most basic principle down.
I agree. And like I said, like, love sounds so easy to do, but then it's so hard, especially when you're holding on to these denser energies or emotions, and
when you begin to understand it as a feeling, and then you start to, okay, I have a memory where I have pure love in me. I have a memory where I can remember pure gratitude. Let me remember that again and again and again. And you start to understand you're cycling that through your system, and then it's now becoming you,
it's
and
like
you sort
seeping out of your pores.
Learn how to operate it. Yeah. Yeah. What you want to do is create that resonance, build it up, and learn how to enlighten with light your own nervous system using the quantum field, because you're already connected there.
Absolutely. So what advice do you have for people who might be going through this walk-in concept?
I would say, obviously, don't be scared. There was so many times where I was simply afraid of my own identity, and just admitting that I was this person at one time in my life, or that person, or I did that to that person. But when I gathered it all together, and you can do this by spoken word, I gather all my lower self together as one charge, because that's what they are. They're emotional charges that are sent out into the field for us to interact with things. Once you gather this all together and you move those identities out, don't be afraid of the death of identity, because you shouldn't stay the same. You should be changing and growing. Once you're able to gather all those identities together, you give them to the intuitive module, the central sun, Christ, which is within you, then it becomes a lot easier when you surrender. I'm just ready to surrender everything, and I will come out as love, and just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and not being afraid to face those other aspects of self or personalities within inside of you. I mean, you wonder if this walk-in soul exchange is what people with schizophrenia, or that concept of just having these multiple voices or different souls kind of battling themselves out within our vessel, and
yeah, I believe for sure that a lot of that is spiritual personalities, even Tourette's. I'm dying to work with somebody who has Tourette's.
yes.
To see. But they just can't discern them. They weren't given the tools.
Yeah, and it's like they're trying to battle with inside the body, like who has power over, over the other a little bit. Like with Tourette's, it's like you've got one personality or soul, and then another one's trying to come to the forefront, and they're yelling out,
And I've seen it in my work in doing the deliverance or the more entity type cases, where they will just come out and talk to me. And I had one come out in African. I had another one speak 3 different languages, and the woman didn't know the languages. But you see it when you see these fragments that get recycled through reincarnation, because they weren't vibrating high enough to move into heaven. So it got passed through universal consciousness and carried on. So it's just a little fragment, and you start to see these fragments move up and present themselves when you give them enough polarity and light photons, basically.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've had that happen in my QHHT sessions when they get into a theta state and then they change. Even in mine, I had 3 different voices in my own personal hypnosis. When my higher self came through, it was very formal, very serious, very robotic kind of sounding, where then I had several other like joy spirits, more childlike nature come through and whatnot. So yeah, there's so much to all of this, and what we don't see, and what's in the unknown. It's just learning how to feel into that and trust and be led by our own intuition and have a deeper understanding of it from a consciousness standpoint,
Yeah, exactly. And on the mechanical part, at times it's like I feel entirely mechanical. I feel like a computational being walking around. And then there's other times where it feels a rich and beautiful experience, and I've learned to trust them when they come in and experience beauty, and just because it's so short, to just give as much love and beauty as I can to creation as a being, as opposed to this person, that person, just wherever I am, resonate as love. And the next step, and this is important, if you can learn to resonate yourself back to love when you're lost, the next step's going to open up. No matter what you're doing, what's going on around you, if you can learn to feel love back in your system again, then you're going to be fine. And the next step's going to open right up for you. You will know where to go.
That's so true. Cause it's like that's where the path is through the heart, and when we can tap back into that, then, we always know we're on the right path if we're being guided through our heart. But society teaches us the opposite, right?
Right. There's so many things in society trying to tell us who we are, how we should feel about this issue, how you should feel about that, or you're no good, or you're guilty for this. At some point, you got to say no more. I know what I am. I was born as love. You're not going to take this from me, and not compromise that value. And then you start to understand anything that does compromise that value is not your friend. That's your enemy. If you need to change my emotions, you're not my friend.
Yeah. And oftentimes our physical body will tell us that too. I know for me, it's like if I'm making decisions that aren't from the heart, my body will tell me. I'll feel pain, or I'll feel a little out of alignment or out of whack. And I'm like, I've got to
Right.
listen to that, because my body, our body manifests things well past the emotional and the energetic. So it's like by the time it's manifesting in my physical, I know that I've already made an energetic decision, about
Yeah.
something. So it's like, I've got to align my physical with the emotional and the energetic and the spiritual aspects of it.
So yeah, absolutely. And if you look at it like a game, okay, I'm in this feeling. I know how to do this. I know how to send love and gratitude into the field, say thank you, and receive it back.
Yes.
Send it out, receive it back. And you start to understand that. Then you have the tools to really get out of any feeling or space you're in. And there's times you may need to process them, allow them to come up and pass, and then sort of go into observation and enlightening mode is what I call it. A lot of people struggle to define enlightened. Well, that's when you can send light into your own nervous system, to your being, and then lighten it. If you don't know how to do that, then what are you doing?
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, no, it's right. I call it, Care Bear stare, they just blast
Yeah.
light out of their chest. And so it's like in those situations where I'm feeling, I'm angry at this person, or I'm having frustration, or I'm stressed. It's like, okay, I literally visualize Care Bear stare. That's kind of my way of processing it, but it's really just sending light out of my heart. And because when we do that, it softens it, right? It softens our emotional charge around it.
Yeah. So you're like, you're charged in this little circle, and you send it out and get it back, then it turns into this circle, send it out, get it back, turns into this circle, that circle, that circle, that circle. And then you become that.
Absolutely. It's like a boomerang, the energy you're putting out is the energy you're going to get back. So I think recognizing that.
Reestablishing those pathways.
Well, this was really enlightening, Steve. I had a really good chat today. Is there, how can people reach out to you? Where, what's your website? Where, if people want to book a session?
You can find me on Facebook at Trinity Healing. You can email me at trinityhealingreiki@gmail.com. You can also find my website at trinityhealingreiki.com. So that's two different ones. trinityhealingreiki@gmail.com is my email. My phone number is 860-877-8234. You can send me a text. I work over any distance. I've worked with clients who had cancer, women and men who just left religious cults. They had a lot of trauma there. People that have had surgery. I've worked with people on the operating table. They booked me for when they had their operation. All sorts of things. And the most important thing is that I hand people the tools that they have to return their state of being to love and to experience how beautiful this world is, because it's very fast.
It is. And it's so important to have people like you who are helping people through those religious cults and whatnot. I've had a few clients like that too. And it takes a special person to be able to be unbiased and to just kind of be there and hold space for them in a state of love. And not everyone can do that, because it's
they felt very comforted with the fact that I worked with the Holy Spirit, I worked with God, I work with Christ, but I'm not religious. My parents never brought me to church. So they were very comforted to see that aspect, because some people struggle when they see Reiki and they have religious ties. But that's who I work with, and that's just another word for pure spirit. The Christ being a singularity expression of love, the law of one, and then God being your source,
Yeah, I love that, because I look at it all like ice cream, right? It's like God's ice cream, but then there's all these different flavors that we've named religions, but it's like all going back to one concept of love. It
was just their culture formed an identity so they can understand it on a physical level. So like underneath all these religions, God should have a value of love. And that's how you recognize God.
Yeah. And if you don't feel that, if you're in a religion and you're not feeling that, then oftentimes it's not in alignment with God, no matter how much someone may be
Absolutely.
telling you it is, right?
Yeah. So what I say is I'm a Christ follower because I like to follow his teachings, his principles, the way he did everything as far as self-purification. And that's important. You want to go out into nature. You want to speak to your subconscious, to all the lower emotions and lower speak and say, you don't live here anymore. Love lives here. I am love. I am a sovereign being and my trauma has no more room here. I'm going to experience life the way I want. You know, people deserve that. And I just know my NDE and the walk-in and the rapid change and everything I went through, losing my family. They're thinking I'm crazy, go to a shrink. Now I'm here. They see I changed people's lives. And at first they were dumbfounded by it. And now they're proud and they understand that they didn't get it at first. And I understand they didn't get it either. But it was all for a reason. It was for me to show people back to themselves.
Yeah, and I think too, as you've changed, because in the beginning you were unsure of what was going on. So of course you were reflecting that out into the people in your life because they were like, what's happening? You know, but as you've become more grounded, they've become more grounded too.
Absolutely. And the funny part was like, I knew I was the key. I just didn't know how to use the key. And that also came. And I didn't mention with the walk-in, how I kind of confirmed that it was a walk-in. Did I cover the dream part?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't think so, because whenever you have spiritual things happen to you, you want to have 2-3 confirmations before you call it spiritual. I had an ex who came back to me who I didn't really, you know, we weren't on good speaking terms, but she said, I had to tell you this. I sat down with these beings and they told me about your NDE and that you had made a deal to shave off some of your time here on Earth for them to come in and do some type of work. So I heard that from her, and then I heard it from a separate person who had another dream. And that's when I was like, okay, this is starting to make sense. My loss of personality and all that.
Interesting. And so it's like, you know, I think sometimes we've got to ask for that external validation to say, okay, is what I'm feeling internally, is it aligned? And then boom, boom,
right,
that happens to me all the time. It's like, okay, I got it. I hear you. Well, this was really good, Steve. I appreciate you sharing.
We covered a lot.
Yeah. So, well, thank you. I appreciate you sharing your story and all that you've went through.
Again, yeah.
Yeah, and
thank you. It was beautiful. I will say it was beautiful because I got to experience so many things I wouldn't know. And this is another thing that's important. If you're in a dark place, no matter how deep it is, you're going to experience deep love on the other end. Because I wouldn't know what deep love is without deep pain, or how valuable one is without the other. And that's why we have both here, so we can understand value and choose.
It's so true, because I see people who are in relationships and they break up and they hate each other. And I'm like, where there's hate, there's love. Because if there's deep hate, there's deep love, there. It's all contrast. And in order for us to experience one or the other, we have to experience that to appreciate it, on the other side. It's that pendulum.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Steve, and I will share all of your information, below for anybody who'd like to reach out to you and possibly have a session or just to learn more about your NDE and, your experience. Maybe there's some people out there who experience something similar to you. I know I've been in contact with several NDE people and they've all had very different experiences, yet some of them have had some things that have been the same. So you can't kind of lump sum everybody's in there.
It's almost like you have your own individual experience within your consciousness, but then there's little similarities between them you can pick out. And man, all I'll say is I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad you're here too. And I'm glad that you came on the show, and thank you so much. And I send, Steve and I both send so much energy out to everyone.